Hi, everybody. Today I'm going to talk about something you may have never heard of, which is 4E cognition. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because in several of my recent leadership groups, I've brought up this idea. I've explained what 4E cognition is and what it's about and the kinds of questions that it asks. And I've found that those leaders get really interested because I think a lot of it comes to them very intuitively. And yet there are thoughts that we typically aren't asked to think about. And I think with this way of thinking that 4E cognition offers us, it can really do a lot to enhance our ability to be effective as leaders. So I want to give you a brief introduction, and then I will create a series of videos to kind of take it apart piece by piece and see how this theoretical understanding or series of questions can impact our work as leaders. So 4E, there's 4E's here. Cognition. This is a group, a loose group of theories that have emerged from cognitive science, from affective science, cognitive neuroscience, neuropsychology, psychology, and also the philosophy of mind as we think about how do we cognize in ways that go beyond the brain. So that's what I'll be talking about today. So first of all, what's cognition? Cognition, very simply, is, I like to say, the figuring out or making sense of a situation or of one's environment. So anytime that you're faced with a problem and you try to solve it, or when you're faced with a decision that needs to be made and you figure out what's the best decision for you or for other people or for the situation, you are cognizing, right? You are figuring out. It is a mental thing. I think a lot of times we can think of cognition as thinking our way through a problem, although feelings play a role too. So that's what cognition is, figuring out. Responding to your environment in a way that's meaningful. So one of the biggest examples, let's say you have a pet that's demanding to be fed, so you feed them. That's cognizing with the environment. Your pet is cognizing too when they say, I'm hungry. I need to let my person know that I'm hungry in order to get food. So they let you know. They're cognizing too. So to interact meaningfully with your environment is cognition. So 4E cognition is, like I said, it's a bunch of theories that all kind of have something in common, which is that we think that the mind, where you figure out things, is not limited to just what's up here. It's not limited to the head. And that's where these 4E's come in. So the first E is embodied. Embodied cognition. You can't think without a body. We like to think that everything happens inside the brain, but actually the brain needs the body in order to figure anything out, right? So you'll notice that, for example, in your work, if there's a mid-afternoon slump, when you start to feel really tired, depleted, irritable, you're going to make different decisions, or at the very least, you're going to interact with your people differently. But here's the thing. If we thought that cognition was just up here and you are always the same human being, no matter when someone reaches you, we know that that's not true, right? So I think you understand what I mean when I say we are embodied. Our mood is affected by our physiological states. And therefore, that's going to affect how we lead, whether we acknowledge that or we think about it or not, right? People are going to get different versions of you depending on what your body is doing or feeling. The second E is embedded. And this is the idea that you are going to think differently. You are going to solve problems differently, and you are going to make decisions differently depending on what situation you are in. So, isn't it true that we all kind of have a different personality when we are standing in front of an audience versus when we think we're alone? Or don't we, in different jobs even, you're embedded in a job, right? So you are going to act differently. You're going to access different talents. You're going to have a different relationship to your cognition depending on where you are and what's expected of you because of the context. That's what being embedded means. The third is extended, which means that, your cognition is not limited to you or your body or your situation, but to the things around you in the physical environment. So one example I'd love to give is, let's say someone's a brilliant musician, a brilliant cellist. And we say, oh, well, can you show us your talent? Do something for us. And they say, well, no, I don't have my cello with me. And we'll say, but you're so talented. You're a brilliant musician, right? Just perform. And they're like, no, you don't understand. I don't have my cello. I can't play for you. And in that sense, we realize, oh, yeah, the talent is theirs for sure, no question, but they don't have access to the talent without the thing around them. Another example, so the cello is like an extension of their cognitive mind. They think with the performance of the cello. Another example is if we keep a phone on our calendar on our phones, and someone says, hey, what are you doing? Can I have this appointment with you 18 months from now, right? And you'll say, well, I don't know if I have something scheduled that day. Probably not, but I have to look. So you turn to your phone and you use your calendar. You have extended your mind, your decision-making capacity to need that calendar. You can't keep it all in your head, so you have to externalize some of it to the external environment. So I hope that that makes sense in terms of extended. And then finally, and this one is kind of my favorite, is enactive cognition. And what that means is that in order to have access to certain cognitive capacities, certain abilities, you have to be doing something. And the best example that I can share with you is, let's say you're going to teach someone to tie their shoes. Now that's a cognitive activity, teaching someone something that you know, right? But in order to teach them how to tie their shoes, you have to be doing it. Otherwise, you don't have access to the knowledge. So if I set you down in a room and I said, you're not allowed to use your body and you're not allowed to use any real shoelaces, you just have to put in word form the instructions for tying shoes, you probably would not even be able to do it, right? And it doesn't mean that you don't know how to tie your shoes. It just means that you need to be doing it in order to have access to that knowledge. So I think this is a really interesting set of theories. I think it's very applicable to education in particular. I want to give you an example. I noticed that, for example, in New York State here, our high school students take state regents exams at the end of a lot of their courses that are statewide exams, but they're given in your local school. So in order to accommodate the number of students who are taking those exams, they set up places like, they set desks in the cafeteria or desks in the gym, etc. And, that makes it's reasonable. It assumes that students who can perform in the classroom or who can perform on their homework are then automatically going to be as able to perform when we shift their location. But we also know through a lot of studies that they simply don't, right? So you're almost setting up someone to do less well by changing their environment. And that's a great example, I think, of embedded cognition, right? Or also extended cognition, where if you learn the material, and I'll talk in a future video about why I don't like the word material here. If we learn in a certain environment like a classroom, and then suddenly we're expected to recall and use, to cognize in a completely different physical environment, it's not going to be the same. And that is just part of the reality that thinking about 4E cognition presents us with. So please let me know what you think about these ideas, and then we'll start to go more in depth as to how these apply to leadership. Stay tuned.